What happens when we die? Some people return with stories of peace and light. Others come back trembling, speaking of darkness and torment. And a few experience both. Tonight, we'll journey through 3 of the most powerful near-death testimonies ever recorded. One filled with reunion and peace, one haunted by flames and terror, and one that crossed from hell into heaven. These are the stories of life after death, between joy and fear. The joyous one, Sebastian Junger. He nearly bled to death on an operating table. Doctors worked frantically to save him as his body shut down. But best-selling author Sebastian Junger says that in those moments of death, he saw something unforgettable. The radiant presence of his father, gone for years, but suddenly, impossibly, there with him again. Sebastian Junger is no ordinary witness to death. He's a war reporter, a man who's walked through battlefields in Afghanistan, Iraq, and beyond. He's written about the chaos of the human condition, about soldiers fighting for their lives and friends lost to violence. He's the author of The Perfect Storm, the true story of men lost at sea, a book filled with courage and tragedy. Junger's worldview was shaped by realism, evidence, and cold, hard facts. To him, the idea of an afterlife was fantasy. When you died, that was it. Nothingness. The lights went out and the story ended. But in 2020, Sebastian faced a battle unlike any war zone he'd ever reported from. And in that battle, his skepticism was shattered. It began quietly, an ordinary day, until suddenly, something inside him gave way. A searing pain like he'd never felt before. Unknown to him, a hidden aneurysm in his pancreatic artery had burst. It was a silent killer, now flooding his body with blood. In an instant, Sebastian Junger was dying. Paramedics rushed him to the hospital, sirens wailing through crowded streets. His vision blurred, his hands turned cold, the world grew distant and strange. By the time he reached the operating room, he had already lost nearly half the blood in his body. Doctors and nurses moved with frantic precision. Monitors beeped wildly, then slowed. Scalpels flashed. Gloved hands reached inside his abdomen to find the source of the bleeding. The room felt like a battlefield. Orders shouted like commands in war. Machines screamed their warnings. The metallic tang of blood filled the air. And then, Sebastian's heart slowed to a whisper. His breathing faltered. The beeping became one long, flat tone. Sebastian Junger was slipping away. And yet, Sebastian says he wasn't gone. Not exactly. As his body shut down, something opened. The chaos of the operating room faded like a storm moving into the distance. The shouting voices became muffled, then silent. The glaring surgical lights dimmed, then disappeared altogether. He felt himself moving, not upward, not downward, just beyond. Beyond pain, beyond fear, into a space unlike anything he'd ever known. A space filled not with darkness, but with clarity, with stillness, with light. And in that light stood his father. His father had died years earlier. But now, impossibly, undeniably, he was there. Not a memory, not a dream, a presence, alive, whole, real. Sebastian later said this moment felt more real than real. The sight of his father was overwhelming. Time seemed to stop. The light around them wasn't like sunlight or a lamp. It wasn't harsh or blinding. It was warm, radiant, and deeply embracing, like being held in pure peace. They didn't speak. There were no words. There was no need. Instead, there was a direct knowing, a communication beyond language, deeper than thought. Everything Sebastian had ever wanted to say to his father, and everything his father wanted to say to him was understood in a single moment of connection. A rush of love and recognition flowed between them. Decades of separation dissolved. The pain of loss vanished. In that light, with his father, Sebastian felt safe, whole, home. Sebastian described his father's appearance as both familiar and transformed. He seemed healthy, vibrant, untouched by age or illness. His presence radiated calm. There was no judgment, no fear, only love. The kind of love so profound, it felt like the very fabric of the universe. In that place there was no time, no past or future, only the eternal now. Sebastian realized something incredible. Death wasn't an ending. It was a return. And in that reunion, he felt a peace beyond anything this world could offer. But the encounter didn't last. Back in the operating room, the doctors were still fighting for his life. Hands worked frantically to restore circulation. Machines roared back to life. Sebastian felt himself being pulled, away from the light, away from his father, back into pain, back into the sterile brightness of the hospital. His father's presence faded like a dream at dawn. And then, with a gasp, Sebastian opened his eyes. He was alive, but forever changed. In his 2024 book, In My Time of Dying, Junger reflects on that moment. He admits that, as a lifelong skeptic, he never believed stories of near-death experiences. He thought they were hallucinations, desperate brain activity, wishful thinking. But now, he couldn't deny what he'd experienced. He had been there. He had seen his father. He had felt the peace of that radiant place, and the memory of it stayed with him, vivid and unshakable. Junger doesn't claim he saw pearly gates or angels or a mapped-out heaven. What he describes is perhaps even more powerful. A realm of love, reunion, and clarity, a glimpse of eternity through the presence of someone he thought he'd lost forever. And Junger is not alone. Across the world, countless people who die and return describe similar encounters. Reunions with loved ones gone before them, places filled with radiant light and a peace that defies human language. Doctors call these events near-death experiences. Skeptics argue they are hallucinations of a shutting brain, but for those who have lived them, like Sebastian Junger, they are undeniable. And what makes his testimony stand out is who he is. He's not a mystic. He's not a preacher. He's a war reporter, trained to see the world without illusion, a man who built a career on skepticism and truth. And yet, when death came for him, what he found was not fear, not nothingness, but his father, waiting in the light. Sebastian Junger's story is one of reunion, peace, and love. But not every near-death experience is like this. Some describe visions of terror, darkness, torment, even hell itself. And for those people, death is not peace. It is something far more horrifying. The hellish one, Rawlings' patient. Some people return from death speaking of light, love, and peace. But not this man. When cardiologist Dr. Maurice Rawlings revived him, he didn't whisper of a tunnel or a heavenly reunion. He came back screaming of fire, shadows, and endless torment. His words shook everyone in the room and remain one of the most terrifying near-death testimonies ever recorded. Dr. Maurice Rawlings was a highly respected cardiologist. For decades, he worked in emergency rooms and operating theatres, bringing people back from the edge of death. Most of the time, patients remembered nothing. A sudden blackout, then waking up confused. But every now and then, a patient remembered everything, and their words would chill even the most hardened medical staff. It began with chaos. The man, middle-aged, seemingly healthy, suddenly collapsed. His heart stopped. No pulse, no breathing. Nurses and doctors rushed in, hands pressing on his chest. CPR performed in rhythmic desperation, the sharp scent of antiseptic in the air, monitors blaring urgent alarms that grew flat, then silent. For several long minutes, his body was technically dead. And in that darkness, he opened his eyes. But he wasn't in the hospital anymore. The sounds of the machines, the voices of the doctors, gone. Only silence. Then, heat. Thick, suffocating heat rising around him, heavy like smoke. He tried to breathe, but the air burned his lungs. A low hum filled the darkness, distant at first, then growing louder. It wasn't machinery. It was voices, whispers at first, mocking, cruel. Dozens of them, hundreds, maybe thousands. Shapes began to emerge, twisted, shadowy figures circling him in the dark. Their eyes glowed faintly, like embers, their mouths twisted into sneers, their laughter echoing. He tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. There was no ground, no walls, no sky, only endless blackness, and the heat grew hotter. Suddenly, hands, cold, clawed hands, grabbed him. They pulled at his arms, his legs, dragging him downward. The whispers turned to screams, to shrieks of delight. They tore at him, clawing, biting, laughing. This wasn't a dream. This was torment, deliberate, intelligent, cruel. The man realized with a horror deeper than words that this wasn't random pain. These beings wanted him to suffer. He couldn't tell how long it lasted. Minutes, hours, years. Down here, there was no time, only endless torment. The beings mocked him, their words piercing his mind.
You are ours now. There is no escape. You will stay here forever.
He screamed, but the screams were swallowed by the darkness, joining the chorus of thousands of other voices. For the first time he noticed them. Countless others in the distance, trapped, writhing, suffering just like him. A sea of souls, lost and forgotten. The heat was unbearable now. Flames rose in the distance, casting sickly red light. But these flames didn't flicker naturally. They twisted and writhed like living creatures, whispering secrets in languages no human could understand. This was no simple fire. It was alive and it was hungry. In the hospital, Dr. Rawlings and his team were still fighting. Shock paddles slammed against the man's chest. His body jolted, then fell limp again. Over and over they tried to bring him back. Each time his heart stopped, he fell deeper into the pit. Each time they revived him, he surfaced, screaming.
Don't let me go back.
He begged.
Please, don't let me go back there.
Rawlings later said this was unlike anything he'd ever seen. The man's words were crystal clear. Flames, shadows, mocking voices, a reality more terrifying than any nightmare. The last time his heart faltered, the man felt himself completely consumed. The hands, the laughter, the burning heat, all crashing over him like a wave. He looked up one last time and saw nothing. No light. No hope. Only an endless, starless void filled with screams. In that moment, he understood. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't a bad dream. This was forever. With one final shock, the medical team brought him back. His chest heaved, his eyes flew open, but he wasn't relieved. He wasn't grateful. He was terrified.
Don't let me go back.
He sobbed, clutching at the doctors.
Please, don't let me go back there.
He never forgot what he saw, and neither did Dr. Rawlings. The experience was so raw, so detailed, so consistent that Rawlings began documenting other patients who reported similar visions. Flames, shadows, cruel beings, and the overwhelming realization that for some, death is not peace, it is torment. Most near-death experiences speak of love and light, but a small, chilling percentage, perhaps 10 to 20%, describes something very different, a place of darkness, suffering, and despair. These stories come from all cultures, all times, all places, and they are hauntingly similar. If heaven exists, perhaps hell does too. The mixed one, Howard Storm. Some people who die and return describe light, love, and peace, but not all. Former atheist Howard Storm died in a hospital and says he was dragged into darkness, where he was torn apart by beings that mocked and tormented him. He calls it hell, and it remains one of the most terrifying near-death experiences ever recorded. Howard Storm wasn't a religious man. He was an art professor, a skeptic, an atheist. To him, death was nothing more than the end. In 1985, while traveling in Paris, he suddenly collapsed from a perforated stomach. Doctors rushed him to a French hospital, but his condition deteriorated rapidly. Lying on the bed, weak and slipping away, Storm realized this might be the end. Storm felt himself rise. At first, he thought he was still alive, standing next to his own hospital bed. But something was wrong. His body lay motionless, yet he was fully aware, fully conscious. And then he noticed them. Figures in the shadows, whispering, calling his name. They told him to follow, and so, uncertain, he obeyed. Out of the hospital room, down long, dim corridors. The further he went, the darker it grew, the quieter it became, until the whispers turned into laughter. Suddenly the figures surrounded him. What had begun as whispers became jeers, taunts, cruel laughter. Then, the mocking turned violent. They shoved him, clawed at him, tore at him. Howard Storm describes being attacked by these beings, ripped apart in ways too horrifying to put into words. He felt their hatred, their delight in his suffering. He begged them to stop. They only laughed harder. Storm says it was like being dragged into hell itself. Not fire, not flames, but darkness, cruelty, and unending torment. Storm did something he never thought he would. Broken, terrified, he cried out into the void,
"Jesus, save me!"
And in that instant, everything changed. From the blackness came a light, small at first, then growing, brighter, stronger, radiant. The tormentors shrank back, cowering, retreating into the shadows. And from that light came a presence of overwhelming love. It lifted him, embraced him, carried him out of the darkness. Storm would later wake up in the hospital bed, alive, shaken, but forever changed. He described what he saw as hell, not fire and brimstone, but a realm of cruelty, hatred, and torment, a place where hope was gone, and suffering had no end. That experience transformed him. The atheist professor became a Christian minister, dedicating his life to sharing the warning he says he was given. 3 stories, 3 lives. Sebastian Junger, who found his father in the light, a patient of Dr. Rawlings, who screamed of flames and torment. Howard Storm, who walked through darkness, then was rescued into peace, joy, fear, heaven, hell. Are these visions of the dying brain, or glimpses of eternity? That answer remains a mystery. But the voices of those who've crossed the line and returned remind us of one haunting truth. One day, we will all find out for ourselves.